In this section, we will review how to select data from a table or view in a database, how to review a table's data by returning a sample set of data, as well as identifying what columns are present in a table. Once we have an idea of a table's data and columns, we can then start to refine our results to meet our specific project requirements. And lastly, we will narrow down our results using a combination of criteria applied in the where clause using fixed and fuzzy logic. In general, every select query written in SQL can be broken down into the following components as I've shown here on the right hand side. Don't worry if this syntax looks a little alien at first, and once we have gone through a few live coding examples, you will see that the process is not too dissimilar to that of making an order in a deli or coffee shop for your lunch. Now let's move on and take a look at a few live coding examples with the SQL database. So let's get started with the live coding example. Here I've laid out my header with the typical sections such as the details about the project that I'm going to be working on, and I've laid out a table of contents here to show what queries I will be running. If needs be, I can minimize the header or the block comment using the plus and minus as discussed earlier. I've copied down my table of contents to the section below and made these as inline comments. For the first query, we will look at selecting all data from a table using the asterisk character. The asterisk character is a special character within SQL that denotes all columns. If we type in select star from, and we can open up on the left here SQL and look at the actor table. We can either type in actor, or another way to bring the table across is to actually double click on the name actor, and this will show on the right hand side. Next, we will execute the command by using the shortcut Ctrl-Shift-Return. And as you can see, this has actually returned an error message. And the error message basically reading as no database selected. I've deliberately done this to show how you can actually work around this error by providing the database name. And as you can see in MySQL Workbench, if I type the name of the database preceded by a dot, it presents with the list of tables. If I run this command again, you can see it does indeed execute. So this is one way of actually getting around having to type in use database every time, or in this case use SQL. This will become more apparent later on when we start working with multiple databases, and preference is sometimes to give the database name within your code rather than asking it to use a database by default. In this scenario, we will go ahead and run the command use SQL, and just to confirm that it has run, we can open up our output window, which shows us how the commands have run and if they've run successfully or not. We can see here with the green tick that these have run successful and the first one didn't run successful. We can hide this off until any more error messages appear. We can remove SQL from the name of the table as we will be continuing to use this database for these examples. Let's take a look at the output again. I'll re-execute. And as you can see, this has provided the output of the table with actor ID, first name, last name, and the last update date. If we have more than enough data to look at for a sample, we can, in the next section, look at using the limit keyword to just pull back a sample of data. We can copy down the same query from above, but this time, as opposed to returning all 200 rows, we can say limit 10. And as you can see, it's returned the first 10 rows from the actor table. For the next example, we will look at how we can specify the column names in a table. And in this scenario, we may be just looking to understand what's in the table, and we've identified that we want the actor ID, the first name, and the last name only. So in this scenario, as we can see, we've got an actor ID that is unique to each actor. Once we have selected the columns that we want to use, we can go ahead and rerun the command, and we can see that this has dropped off the last update date and only provided us with the actor ID, first name, last name. For the next example, we will introduce the where clause. I'm curious to see, is there an actor in the database that has a first name similar to myself? And to do this, I can say where first name equals Jeffrey. And as it's a text string, I need to place that between quotes. If this was a numeric value such as actor ID, I wouldn't need to place this in quotes. I could say, for example, actor ID equals 1 without placing it in quotes. Let's go ahead and run this. And we can see there's an actor, Jeffrey Heston, who has an actor ID of 151. That's a very simple example of using the where clause. If we wanted to look at somebody with the last name of Jeffrey, and this can happen where in some scenarios you've accidentally selected the wrong field. With this select statement I've run, it's returned the 3 columns that I requested, actor ID, first name, last name, but there are no rows of data. As you can see, there is no index value, but the values that are coming back are showing as null. And null is a special reserved word in SQL and typically in a lot of programming languages, which means that there was no data found. This is not to be mistaken with the space character, which could be an empty string that is actually somebody has typed in using spaces. If that was the case, then null would not be showing here. It would be actually fully white. So you need to be careful when searching. Has somebody there put in blank? And as we know that there is somebody with a last name Heston, we can go ahead and run this, and that corrects our query. For the next example, just to expand a little bit on using first name, to look at for any actors that have names beginning with G. And instead of saying equal, which is an absolute logic statement, we can change this to be like, which is what we call a fuzzy statement or fuzzy logic. Now we can't just type in G on its own, we have to specify where we want to have the character or word found. So we could say, for example, Jeff followed by any character, which we denote with the percentage sign. Or we might have the percentage at the beginning, which is to say, find any words followed by the name Jeff. And lastly, with the like, we can say, find any string which has Jeff somewhere in the name, beginning and end. For this example, we want to know, are there any other actors who have a name beginning with G? We can go ahead and run, and as you can see, we've had a number of actors return. To expand on the where clause, we'll now move over to the address table. And one way of identifying what's in a table without returning any data, if we just wanted to see the columns, is to actually use the limit keyword, and we can say limit 0. And this will return no rows but the column names instead. And as you can see, it's returned an error where I've said limit equal to 0, where this is actually limit should be set to 0. And again, good to check that you're reading your error messages. In this case, it's saying you have an error in your SQL syntax, check the manual or the corresponding. And if we hover over, it tells us right at the end that this is an error near the value equal to 0 at line 3 in our code. So it's pointing directly back up to our code to say on line 1, 2, 3, something here near 0 was impacting our query. And in this case, I've written equal to 0, and by removing that, it will execute correctly. So here we could see the columns that are within the address table. And as I might want to see some of the sample data, I'm going to do a limit of 10. And as you can see here, there are a number of addresses where no value was given in address 2 and they're represented as null. And some addresses that obviously put in a space or a blank character where there is no null, but there is some data represented in the column here. As an example of a where clause, I'm going to look for where the district equals California. And if we don't want to type out California in case we have some spelling mistakes, or this, for example, might be a product name or ID or a very long string, we can select on the cell and use the standard Control C to copy and Control V to paste in here. Or you can right click on and do copy field and paste back up into the screen. In this instance of the Saqula database, the tables are not case sensitive, but in some databases you will find that case sensitivity has been explicitly turned on, or even for a given table case sensitivity has been set. So this is possible to set. If, for example, we were searching for California with a lowercase c, if the table was case sensitive, then no data would return. Versus with it being case sensitive and it's expecting that California has a capital C, then this would return the value if case sensitivity was turned on for that table. This is becoming increasingly popular with some very large retail merchants, or merchants in general, where they have a lot of descriptive information and they want to capture it exactly as it is shown. But in general, you will find if you're searching through a field, you can check by first pulling out a sample of the data and passing in a lowercase or uppercase value just to check. So in this scenario, I can say select all from address where California with a lowercase c, and we can see that it does indeed return. This informs me that this table is not case sensitive, or at least the field is not case sensitive. If you're ever in doubt as to why something may not be returning, think, is the field, table, or database potentially case sensitive? We've returned here and we can see that we have a number of customers in our Saqula database that are from the California area. And we might want to limit this down to actually look for just customers who are living in a specific address area. So we have District of California, and we can say and address. This is the address line 1 is like, so we're asking it that it contains a value, and we're going to ask to review for avenue, and we can put in just AVE, part of the term avenue, or we could put in all avenue. Now, as I know that avenue sometimes is abbreviated to AVE, here we can see 4 addresses have come back where we've provided criteria of District California and the address field is like AVE. That concludes our live demo of reviewing the Sakula database with select and where clauses.